How are we doing, folks? I hope we're all keeping well. In today's lesson, we are going to look at a case study in Ireland. So we're going to look at the impact of overgrazing in Ireland. Okay. First of all, when we say overgrazing, what do we mean? Well, overgrazing basically means when animals, usually farm animals, so cattle or sheep, they grazed grass, they eat the grass on the land so much that it can damage the land and cause soil erosion, and this can lead to a number of problems. Okay, so human interaction with soil can increase the likelihood of mass movement, and that's the main problem that overgrazing causes there. Okay, it can cause mass movement, so it can cause things like it can weaken the ground, particularly in hilly and mountainous areas, and it can cause things like mudslides, like landslides, and if there's a bog, for example, a bog burst. Okay, now we're going to look at why overgrazing occurred in Ireland. Okay, so Ireland joined the European Union in 1973. Okay, so we see here, 1973, Ireland joined the EU. And what did this mean for Ireland? Okay, well, it meant that Ireland got lots of money and lots of grants from the EU, in particular for farming. And one group of farmers to benefit from Ireland joining the EU were sheep farmers. Okay, so the EU, the European Union, paid subsidies to sheep farmers. Okay, so they basically gave sheep farmers grants. And what this meant is that sheep farmers could now afford to keep more sheep. So these subsidies led to a huge increase in the numbers of sheep in Ireland. Okay, again, guys, why was this? Because farmers got grants, and these grants could be used, for example, to buy more feed, to invest in more land, for example, to pay for more veterinary gear. And this meant they could have bigger herds of sheep. Okay, for example, in Mayo and Galway alone, there were 2 million sheep. That's just in Mayo and Galway, two counties, rural counties in the west of Ireland. So that gives you an idea of the amount of sheep there were in Ireland. Okay, in Ireland as a whole, there were 9 million sheep. So there were about there's 4.9 million people in Ireland, and at this stage there was, because of the EU grants and the increase in sheep numbers, there were twice as many sheep basically as there are in Ireland to this day. Okay, so a huge amount of sheep. During the 1990s, too many sheep were allowed to graze for too long on vulnerable areas of land. Okay, so that's something these farmers didn't really think through. So these had just increased their herd size of sheep by a lot. Okay, but it meant that the land got overused and overgrazed. So look at this hill here, completely covered in sheep. Okay, because there were so many sheep, they had to graze the land that was available, and they were grazing too much of the land. Okay, and this was a problem. This was called overgrazing, and this could lead to problems down the line. Okay, so as a result of the overgrazing, up to 30% of upland areas in Ireland were at risk. Okay, so 30% of upland areas, a huge number of upland areas at risk because the sheep are overgrazing. Now, why do I say at risk? When I say at risk, I mean, you know, the soil is being eroded, the soil is becoming weaker, and for example here, like this hill here, because the soil is getting weaker and being eroded, you know, there's a greater chance of a landslide, for example, happening here. Okay. The Connemara uplands are very sensitive to changes in grazing patterns. Overgrazing puts pressure on vegetation, particularly in upland areas. Okay, so again, guys, like these upland areas, they wouldn't be the most fertile soils in the world, so they kind of struggle to grow vegetation, plants and grass and trees at the best of times. So when these areas are being overgrazed, it puts extra pressure on them, and what this means is that they can't really support the growth of vegetation. Okay, and vegetation is important, so plants are important on a hill like this, because plants, like the roots of all the grass on that hill, is going to help consolidate and keep all that soil together. Okay, and if you take those roots away because of overgrazing, that means there's more chance of there being a landslide in a place like this. Okay, and we're going to look at what happened because of overgrazing now in the west of Ireland. So as you've already said, the loss of vegetation, so too much eating of grass by animals, can lead to soil erosion and mass movement in the form of mud flows and landslides. And that's exactly what happened here, guys. Okay, so if you think about it, like this is a hill while overgrazing is occurring, and this is a hill after overgrazing. So because the slope was weakened by the loss of vegetation, there was a landslide as a result. Okay. Now, what do we have lots of in the west of Ireland? We have lots of bogs. Okay, and bogs are quite heavy, wet areas. So overgrazing eroded the peat down to the mineral soil, leading to bog burst. Okay, so because the bogs are eroded so much, there is bog burst, which is a really dangerous form of landslide because it's like a mixture of soil and wet peat, which is really heavy and really destructive. Okay, um, bog material is acidic, and bursts have led to lakes in the region filling with silt and becoming acidified. So because of bog burst, guys, these bogs would have flown down the hill. Okay, and as a result, the bogs made their way into lakes, and this polluted the lakes, making them acidified, and it got into the water supply. And what it did is it killed a lot of marine life. Okay, so what they actually did in the west of Ireland is the local county councils actually got fishing nets, and they fished as many fish as they could out of the rivers and out of the lakes, and they moved them to cleaner rivers and cleaner lakes so they could survive. Why was this? Because the lakes had been polluted and the rivers had been polluted because of acidified peat. Okay, folks, thanks very much for watching. Don't forget to answer the questions on the final slide here.